Good morning and welcome to Smith & Company. I'm Joe Smith. For the next hour, we're going down memory lane with Ruta, a Hollywood icon in the truest sense. This was recorded in 2019.
Were you always destined to be in show business?
I think so.
How so?
I think that I came out of my mother's womb into tap shoes. I just felt like there wasn't anything else. And my mom was not exactly what you would call a showbiz mom. My mom was a little peasant girl from Lithuania who carried her shoes to church because they had to be passed down to the next daughter and the next daughter. Very poor family, you know. If they had a cow, it was a blessing. And when she came to, they wanted to get into the United States, but the quotas were closed. And so my father took a job in the wheat fields of Alberta or Saskatchewan or someplace, and to work in Canada. And then he brought my mother over, and I was born in Montreal, Canada. And she always had a very heavy accent, as did my father, and knew nothing about show business or New York or theater, nothing at all like that, but knew the movies. They went to see the movies if they had a few pennies to spare. And to her, I was Lithuania's answer to Shirley Temple. And there you go. So my mother made sure that I had the lessons. And to this day, I am so grateful to my kindergarten teacher, whose name was Mrs. Jackson. Mrs. Jackson said to my mom, "Mary Kilmonis, your daughter is different than the rest of the kids in my classes. She has something going for her. So make sure that she has some lessons in music or dance or whatever." And my mother did. And my father used to say, "Oh, for why you wasting your money? God damn it, what you doing?" And she would say, "If nothing ever happens, at least my heart won't ache that I didn't give her any of the opportunities." And I'm so happy to say that my mom got us to Hollywood because they got tired of the snows of Montreal up to their nose every winter. And my father said, "Florida is right down the road, you know, a piece down south from Montreal." But my mother thought, Hollywood. Hollywood is where the movies are made. So she communicated with a marvelous man, Monsignor Macijauskas was his name. Lithuanian, of course, is my background. And he invited them to come and visit in his teeny little parish that he had started, the Lithuanian Catholic Church. And they came out to California in mid-February. Well, let me tell you, the palm trees were swaying, the flowers were blooming, the birds were chirping. My parents fell so in love with Los Angeles, Southern California. My mom said she cried all the way home on the train because the palm trees were waving goodbye to her, you know. And thank God that my mother got to see some fruits of her labor come into existence and some success for this silly little girl that she thought was Lithuania's answer to Shirley Temple.
And so that leads me to, what did you get from your mother and what did you get from your father that makes you Ruta?
From my father, I got the stamina, the energy. My father was very energetic. Great speed, tenacity. From my mother, I got the calmness, a different kind of tenacity with a little more patience, although That's one of the qualities I'm a little short on. God has blessed me with a lot of stuff, but patience was one of them. And the stick-to-itiveness, I guess the tenacity to accomplish whatever you have to. But my dad was more happy-go-lucky, and I see that in my nature.
That's pretty obvious. And it's also obvious when you look at your career. You have been, it would be easier to say the programs you haven't done than to the ones that you have, because you were on everything.
Well, during the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, yes. And then when a lot of stars that originally didn't deign to appear on television, it would be beneath their dignity, you know, realized that that's where the money was, because movies were drying up and it just wasn't happening anymore. Then I was running out of jobs because big stars with big names, whether it was June Allison or Betty Grable or whoever it may be, were taking over the jobs that I would normally have gotten as the leading lady. And so I went out on the road and did a lot of shows all over the country. And that was a great experience. And Joe, I've got to tell you, the talk shows and the daytime game shows made me an entity that wasn't a character, you know, that I was playing. But people got to know Ruta Lee and either like or dislike Ruta Lee as a person. And it was so exciting to have someone come backstage after the show and not think of me as, ooh, Marilyn movie star, but as Ruta. Because why? I'd spent time in their kitchen, in their living room, or they watched me between their toes on the Carson show, you know, anything like that. And they'd come backstage and say, hey, Ruta Lee, want to come to dinner Sunday? We're going to have people for dinner. You want to come, honey? And I thought, isn't this remarkable what television really means and has meant and will continue to mean to the world? It's our greatest communication system.
So people got to know you as a person rather than as a character. But you've played some incredible characters.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about some of your favorites, because there's the list goes on. I mean, many of the television series, but some of the movies that people will remember.
Oh, well, of course, my very first movie is, needless to say, my favorite movie, and that's Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And people still refer to that, and that still holds up so beautifully in the business, you know. That's run all the time. Being leading lady to Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, and the Crosby Boys wasn't all bad either. And the only, well, I shouldn't say it's a regret, but it twinkles every once in a while. I'm saying, I think I'm the only girl in Hollywood that didn't have an affair with Frank Sinatra. Stop and think about it. Think about the book I could have written.
Well,
although that's part of it.
Okay, because you are. We'll get to that because you are writing a book. Yeah.
But working with Clint Eastwood in his first series, The Rawhide, was just fabulous fun. We were supposedly had gotten drunk and gotten married. And it turned out that the preacher wasn't a real preacher, so, you know, that got him out of that jam. But working on Bonanza with all the boys.
And so what was it like, though, at that point? Because, you know, when Bonanza came out, then it was like in living color, and that was a whole new thing. So you were always part of something that was new and something that was growing. And at the time, did you think of it that way?
Hell no. I was too young and too stupid to realize how blessed and lucky I was. I mean, I got to work. My first huge disappointment in show business, other than not getting a job, let's put it that way, was getting a job, working on it, and then having it gone from the movie, which was anything goes. And I got to spend time and got to know Frank Sinatra and Mitzi Gaynor and Donald O'Connor and Jean Mayer. And I was very slinky in a black slinky gown in a party sequence. and had some smiles and whatnot. And I guess that party sequence wasn't necessary to the film. And I went to the opening and I went, where did everybody go? What happened? I went home in tears, you know, because it was all gone.
And so did you take that as I failed, or?
No, just took it as another little piece of learning that you know, get along the way, but it's so sad.
Welcome back. Today on Smith & Company, we're talking with Ruta Lee.
You have worked with, I think, everybody that there is in Hollywood to work with. Lucille Ball.
I'm the only one left alive, let's put it that way, that knew everybody. I used to get calls from our darling George Pinocchio, whom I'm sure you know quite well. He's the red carpet guy for the other channel, ABC. When he first came to Hollywood, I had met him through friends in Texas. And Bobby Wygant, whom you probably know because she was the voice of NBC for 50 years. She made the arrangement, and he used to call me all the time and say, so-and-so just died. What do you know? Because I don't know him, never met him, you know.
And you would know all these people.
And I would give him all the information. So he got to be calling me and saying, hi, it's the angel of death. Tell me, tell me what you can tell me about so-and-so.
You do have, I mean, you are an encyclopedia of Hollywood.
In some ways I am, and in that there are not too many of us that are still alive and kicking, you know. And I'm still full of energy and working and doing, and not working the way I used to anymore because now I'm too old for all those parts.
But you're still working.
Yeah, on occasion, but now more in your genre, in that I've been doing a lot of interview shows, and you know, I did 5 years of Talk of the Town, which sort of hopscotched around the country, and I love it. I love your end of the business too, being the interviewer rather than being the one interviewed.
I mean, the great thing is to meet somebody that you admire and respect their work, and then find out how nice they are, and you find out something you didn't know about them.
And isn't it fun to ask people questions that you want to know?
Exactly.
You as a person out in the audience, and not a written, canned kind of...
You're right, exactly. I find it interesting that, you know, everybody thinks that because you work in Hollywood that you know everybody in Hollywood. And I think a lot of times it comes across that way. But you have become friends with so many of these people. Lucille Ball was a good and dear friend. How did that happen?
I originally met her at the racetrack in Del Mar. They were big race people.
Yeah.
Well, Desi certainly was. He was a gambler. And I happened to be wearing a polka-dotted skirt, and polka dots were almost her insignia, you know. She loved polka dots. And she commented on my dress and loved it. And I mean, I was thrilled to death to be seated next to her in the box that we were in. Some very lovely gentleman had flown us down to the track, and I thought I was died and gone to heaven, you know, to be seated with Lucille Ball.
And you were on her show a couple of times?
And then I was invited onto the show, and she paid me a great compliment when asked by the press. She said, not only is Ruta talented and knows how to work the system, meaning the 4-camera system, but she's also a very good broad. And coming from Lucy, that was a great compliment.
So kind of growing up in that atmosphere of Hollywood, and of the stories that we hear today of how people progressed and became stars, what was it like for you? Did you encounter any of those kind of Me Too moments that we hear so much about?
Well, first of all, I never became a star. Not of the highest echelon. I was always a leading lady in certain things, but I never had that big, huge thing that everybody said, oh my God, from there she's going to become such a star. that role on the big screen never happened for me. Did a lot on the little screen. And in fact, it was responsible for a lot of good stuff that came my way, like the Sinatra movie and like Witness for the Prosecution. Thank God for television, you know, that those things came along. I have to tell you a story, by the way. I'm not getting to... We'll come back to your question.
All right.
I love this, and it's going to be in the book also. I was invited by a former Palm Springs resident to go to the Macombo, which was one of the clubs in Hollywood, to see Frank Sinatra. Television had come in, nightclubs were not doing well. Mary Morrison, who owned the Macombo, prevailed upon Frank Sinatra to come in and play a week, and then maybe Dean would come in and play a week, and then maybe Sammy would come in and play a week, trying to get the business, you know, going. This was the late 50s. And so I was invited by Scotty Rubin was his name, well known in Palm Springs. He loved to have pretty people around him, and so he had a table of like 12 at the Macombo, and Frank was working on a table this size, a dais, in front of the orchestra and the stage. You know, a nightclub stage is very small, and so he was on this tiny dais. His orchestra filled the stage, and we were seated right where we are, right? And I'm staring up at Frank Sinatra. Now, you and everybody who ever saw Frank Sinatra knows that there was nobody as mesmerizing as a live performer like Frank Sinatra. He was absolutely captivated. I had never seen him in the glory days. I was too young, you know, in New York, but now I'd heard all the unrequited love songs, and he was, you know, a really big cheese. And I sat there absolutely captivated. He finished the performance, and someone sent a note to our host and said, "Would you bring Miss Lee around to my table? I'd like to meet her, please." And so Scotty took me around to the man, and he said, "Hello, my name is Arthur Hornblow Jr. I am a producer, and I am producing a film currently called Witness for the Prosecution. And I have just given you a very unique screen test, young lady. I've seen you on television before. However, I watched you," because he was behind the dais, "watch Frank Sinatra, and I think you would be a very good love interest for Tyrone Power in my film. Will you come in and meet with Billy Wilder, the director?" And I said, "Is tomorrow too soon?" And he said, "Come on in." They put me on film, shot this, that, asked me a couple of questions. That was that. I went home. Marlene Dietrich took one look at the test film and said, "Nicht, nein, forget it. She's blonde." I became a brunette overnight. They had me dye my hair, fade out, fade in, Witness for the Prosecution. Like a year or two later, as everybody who knows Frank Sinatra knows, that he loved nothing more than having friends over to the house for dinner, big Italian dinner, and run a new movie. What are they running that night but Witness for the Prosecution? And Howard Koch was then in partnership with Frank Sinatra. And Frank, during the night, says, "Howie, I've been watching this Ruta Lee chick on television a lot. What do you think about her for one of our upcoming movies?" And of course, I've worked for Howard many times, and he said, "Frank, you just happened to pick one of my favorite girls in the world." That's how I got to be leading lady to Frank Sinatra, who never knew that I got the job that got me the job with him because of him.
I tell you, happenstance.
Is that serendipity?
That
is that the dear Lord working in mysterious ways?
Yeah. But see, you recognize that. Did you recognize it at the time or not?
No, of course. Well, yes, of course I recognized that it was pure luck. But wow, you don't stop to think, glean every moment and hang on to it and write it down and keep a precious record and memento of what's happening in your life, because you're young and you're stupid and you think, oh, this is going to happen every day. You know, what the hell?
It's going to last forever.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Smith & Company, a conversation with Ruta Lee. She talks about the importance of giving back.
I want to read a quote that you have, and I think it's just kind of funny. It says, "It really could have been a sweet little picture, you know, but it was done on 29 cents. That was the early 70s when we all had huge hair. I mean, when I think of it, that movie now, and wondered, I could have floated off into space with that hairdo."
This was a movie that was originally called Doomsday, and it had a fabulous cast. Beautiful Mala Powers, and didn't she win an Academy Award, or at least she was nominated for Long Nose,
Pinocchio.
No, the other, the real Long Nose.
I don't know.
I'll think of it in a minute. It's a classic film.
Not Pinocchio?
No, that's a cartoon. The swordsman with the
Cyrano de Bergerac.
Cyrano, thank you very much. She was in it, and oh my God, Bobby Van, and lovely son-in-law to C.B. DeMille. Who am I talking about? A fabulous star once upon a time, later became much more of a character man. Doesn't matter. I'll call everybody at 2 in the morning and tell you. He was in it, and it never got finished because the union wouldn't let us work unless the money came every day to pay us. And so we'd sit around in the so-called space module chairs, which were barbershop chairs that were made to tilt back a little further. And it never got finished, and then some Japanese outfit picked it up, and now there we are speaking Japanese. It's rather interesting. So it didn't even escape, never mind release. It didn't even escape in the United States.
When you were doing some of these, whether it was TV shows or you were actually doing some voiceover work for a cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know at the time, well, I think this is going to be good, or you realized, this I will not be putting on the resume reel?
I think we all realized that when we were shooting Doomsday, later to be called Doomsday Plus 7, later to be called The End of the World. I can't remember what the Japanese title was. But that I think we knew then and there. But, you know, who was the lovely person that said, some great British actor said, there are no small parts. There are only small actors. And I'm a firm believer in, don't get caught up in believing your own public relations, publicity stuff that's out there. Realize that you're just one tiny cog in something very big, and women especially have a very short life in the business.
But
Men are blessed.
Wait a minute, you've been doing it for how many years now?
Oh boy, 60 more.
Yeah. And you're still doing it.
Yeah.
You've given a lot of your time, I know, to causes for the veterans and to other organizations. What draws you to the veterans?
These lovely young people are willing to put their lives on the line for us every day. And we, as Americans, are the most generous people in the world, but somehow we forget our own. We don't mean to, but they slip through the cracks, and there are so many good causes to give to that we forget about veterans who are returning. And my cause has always been mental health. The Thalians, which Debbie Reynolds and I, headed up for 60 years, I still do. I still do. Debbie has gone and left me, this silly girl. We have always been Hollywood for mental health. Long before it became fashionable to be mentally disturbed, as most of Hollywood is, we were worrying about mental health and shining I'm always wanting to say a spotlight onto that terrible deep pit that's mental illness. And now that my husband is in dementia, interesting, isn't it, that I've spent my life worrying about mental health, and now I've got my beautiful, darling husband of 45 years who is in dementia. Hollywood could shine a spotlight on this, and we did for a lot of years, and we built a clinic at the first building at Cedars-Sinai in Hollywood that we were very, very proud of. But now we've changed our focus to the mental health of returning veterans. I frankly got tired in some ways of us supporting kids that were shooting stuff in their arm or up their nose by choice, rather than kids that were injured because a suicide bomber came into their truck, or they stepped on a landmine, or they were shot. And so we joined Operation Mend at UCLA, and Operation Mend heals the broken bodies, and we Thalians heal the broken mind and the broken spirit. And I'm very proud of the Thalians because it was started back in 1955. I wasn't in on the very beginning. Debbie did work right from the beginning. But it was a group of young Hollywood types that got together with agents and managers and lawyers and people in allied fields to the industry, who got tired of being called pot-smoking, hard-drinking, sex-minded idiots that had nothing to contribute, and said, let's do something. And I love this. They sent out Jane Mansfield and Mamie Van Doren to look for a good charity. And they came home to the next meeting next month later and said, well, all the good charities have been taken. So we found a doctor who deals with emotionally disturbed children, which he described as a rotten apple in a barrel, an emotionally disturbed child, because it could infect the whole barrel if you didn't fix that child. And so first we started dealing with the children, and then we built the clinic, and we dealt with everything from pediatric through geriatric care. But now I'm proudest, most of us, because we're dealing with the kids, like I say, who are willing to put their lives on the line.
This morning, a conversation with Ruta Lee, a true Hollywood icon. We're spending this hour with a true Hollywood legend, Ruta Lee. In this segment, Ruta talks about her late husband, Webb Lowe.
He's been the love of my life. We met on an airplane, you know.
Oh, really?
Oh, talk about God.
First class, I hope.
We were actually first class. I don't fly short distances first class. It's too expensive, but somebody picked up my tab on this. In fact, I was doing a good deed for the Thalians.
Oh, okay.
I had left Dallas, where I was doing a play, to come to be the guest star for the LPGA in Naples, Florida. And I flew in the winter wearing a fur coat, got off the plane, it's hot, I'm carrying it. They picked me up in a private plane at American, flew me over to Naples. I put on the eyelashes and, got out the feather boa and made like Marilyn movie star. Did my thing for the LPGA. Next day, I had to be back to do a play in Dallas. And so I had no makeup on, my hair under a babushka, big sunglasses, carrying the fur coat. When they dropped me off, I ran across the tarmac. It's hot. I get over to American Airlines, and they took pity on me and said, Miss Lee, we'll pre-board you as soon as the flight's cleaned up. It's a turnaround flight. I said, fine. And I'm leaning on the counter like this. All I want to do is get on the plane and sleep because I have to do a show tonight. And I look down the hall and I see a great pair of Gucci loafers coming at me. Up a little further, nice slacks with a crease in them.
You noticed all that.
Up a little further, a double-breasted blazer with gold buttons. Oh, I thought, be still my heart. Little further, this craggy, wonderful face that's a cross between Clint Eastwood and Lee Marvin, somewhere in there. Shock of silver hair. And I stared and thought, isn't he gorgeous? And he walked towards me, and right past me and down the hall. And I thought, oh, shoot. Ships that pass in the night. They pre-board me. I've got all my stuff. I always ask for the bulkhead seat. I've got all my stuff sitting here that I'm pushing under the seat that I shouldn't have been doing, you know. And I look down and the same pair of shoes are standing there. And he said, oh, is this seat taken? And I said, for the last time in my life, no. And he reached his hand over and he said, hello, my name is Webb Lowe. And I said, hello, my name is Ruta Lee. And we should be married because I'd be Ruta Lee Lowe and we could open a Chinese laundry. Well, he's pissed that we don't have a laundry. 45 years later.
Wow. But 45 years.
Yeah,
How
very
brave.
good years.
Yeah.
Very blessed years.
How lucky you are.
Yeah, I'm lucky, but like you said, nobody gets out unscathed one way or another. So
You're writing a book?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we can tell the title.
Why not?
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, stop and think about it. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on his ass. Well, my title is Consider Your Ass Kissed. And I mean it in the most loving, generous way. There have been so many people who have done so much good for me in my life. And even if it's somebody who just sat and turned the set on because Ruta was going to be on, that was a blessing to me. And so I want anybody who ever crossed my life in any way that smiled at me, that took a smile from me and felt better, that watched me, that came to see me by buying a ticket or whatever it took, consider your darling ass kissed.
Welcome, Ruta. It's always a better day when we talk to you.
Oh, my dear Joe, you bring such joy, laughter, entertainment, information to your listeners, and thank you for sharing all your friends with me.
Well, it is always a pleasure. You know, I've known you for a few years now, and you always bring a smile to my face. You make me laugh. And the book title, as you promised a couple of years ago, Consider Your Ass Kissed, and I questioned you on that. I said, why that title? And you said...
And I said, it's an expression that I have used for, it seems to me, 1,000 years. I am so grateful to so many people in my life, people that have helped me grow up, people that have helped me in my career, people that have helped me by giving me money for my Thalians, which is Hollywood for Mental Health. And what else can I do to those people who bought a ticket to see a show I was in, who bought a ticket to go to a movie that I was in, that turned on the television set if I was on? What can I do but from the bottom of my heart say, please consider your ass kissed? So I mean it in deep gratitude to everybody that has in some way or other colored my life, brightened my life, helped my life, been a boost for me. So many people, and thank you, thank you, thank you. And I mean it sincerely. And of course, I never thought about using it as a book title, Joe, but our mutual friend, George Pinocchio, who is the red carpet man for ABC television, is a long time friend. I call him one of my kids. He said to me, if you ever get this frigging book of yours written, that's what should be the title. And I think he's so right, because if nothing else, that'll grab an audience.
Grab them by the, well, anyway.
Yes.
So when you got to the point of actually writing it, what was your starting point? What did you want to put out there for us, the audience, to get?
Well, I never considered myself an author or a writer. one of the reasons is that I failed typing 4 times in high school. I just couldn't get the gist of doing it according to the system that was being taught. And I have such profound respect, Joe, for writers who sit down day after day, month after month, year after year, and for a living write books. I find it very, very difficult to do that. So I never thought even of doing it. But a friend in Texas, who was a PR man that I worked with many times, as you know, Texas is my home away from home. And I played at the theater there for, God, almost 50 years. Casa Mañana, my favorite theater. And so whenever I visited on shows like yours, with hosts that were hosting talk shows and visit shows, I always had interesting stories to tell. At least Barry Rogers, the PR man, thought they were very interesting. And he said, you tell such good stories. They really should be in a book, and you should be sharing this with the world because they're fun, they're interesting, they're exciting and celebrated people from all around the world. And you've had personal, intimate experiences with them. You should share that. So he thought enough of the idea that he came out to California and sat with me over a weekend and recorded everything I ever said. And I just recounted kind of stories, with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or whatever. And of course, when he recorded all of this, now he transcribed everything. Of course, on the transcriptions, he also got every dog bark and every excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom now, every telephone ring, and all of that all had to be edited out. And somehow we just found stories, and I found a way to sort of put them into chapters that would make sense. And it was a long process because I never took it seriously enough to sit down and really write a book. We sort of did it whenever I felt like it. Then I said, I don't know if I want to do this. And finally, when it got done, and we found a publisher, Britain Publishing, who took the book and really didn't edit it at all. Very little in the way of editing. And that, I understand, is the most horrendous thing for any writer to go through, that when the editor comes along and throws the baby out with the bathwater, you sort of feel like you've been injured and maimed. But it was a wonderful experience. But Joe, I have that long history and a wonderful story about my grandmother being deported to Siberia, from Lithuania, and my grandfather dying en route, and the 15 years that she lived in the Soviet Union in Siberia. All of this was given, excuse me, very short shrift. I only gave it 1 chapter in the book, and I feel like I really need to do a longer, more serious, and more loving version for consumption. And I think it would probably make a great film.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I was going to ask you if you left, everything on the table, or if you have a sequel in your life.
Well, I still have so many stories to tell. Every once in a while, I'll be chatting with friends, again, either over coffee or a martini. And it's, oh, Lord, I didn't put that in the book. Oh, I should have talked about that. Oh, that story is a fun one. But I did talk about some of the wonderful ladies that are so familiar to the Palm Springs people, to our Valley people, the Gabor sisters, and Mama. I did talk about other stars that are also familiar to the desert, Frank Sinatra, and good people, just good people, period, and how they really did make a marked difference in my life one way or another.
You've told the story of kind of in the beginning when you were, a ticket taker at a movie theater, and
one of my
and
major
who would have
careers.
thought? I know, but who would have thought that you would be accused of stealing?
Oh, I know. I mean, I am probably the most honest person in the world. Oh, I have reached over and taken a chunk of candy off the desk of in someone's office, but I was working at Grauman's Chinese, which was the creme de la creme if you had a job as an usherette. Now, most of your listeners and viewers will not even know what the hell an usherette is. But in the good old days in the movie theaters, in the palaces that we had ushers and usherettes to take you to your seat, find you a nice seat where you'd like to sit. And I loved that job because then I'd stand at the top of the aisle. And when I finally got a job at Grauman's Chinese and I stood there in my little red tunic with the black pants and a flashlight, I watched all the movie queens, you know, Betty Grable and June Haver and Mitzi Gaynor and Ethel Merman, these fabulous queens that were doing the big musicals. And I'd stand at the top of the aisle and say, oh, dear God, please let me do that. I have to do that. I want to do that too. Please, God. Well, I was doing very well as an usherette, but then the Candy Girl got either fired or left or whatever. So I was promoted to Candy Girl, which was fine because in spite of the fact that I was lousy in math, always have been and still am, I could deal with 10, 15, 20, 25 cent increments. You know, that was fine. And that's the prices of candies and popcorn and thing in those days. Then and of course, then if I wasn't selling something, I could step over to the aisle and watch the movie queens again. Now, one day the cashier, Joe, got sick in the ticket booth and I got promoted to cashier. And I said, oh, no, I can't do this. Because tickets were in those days like $1.98 or $2.12 or something, odd, weird numbers that I couldn't deal with. He said, don't worry. You just punch in 2 tickets at $1.98, and if they give you $5 or $10, you put it in and you put in how much you're given, it'll give you the right change. Well, it gave me too much right change, and I obviously gave away $40. And we were short in the box office that night, and they accused me of having stolen it. And I said, I didn't steal it, and you'll be sorry, because someday my hand and footprints will be here, and you'll see a boy I left in tears. Well, Thank the dear Lord, my guardian angels, Lady Luck and Serendipity, where is my star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but directly in front of the friggin' box office?
How great is that?
Isn't that wonderful? Is that a Hollywood story? It's a dream story.
It really is. And can you remember going back of how much you were paid to be the Candy Girl as a promotion as opposed to taking the tickets?
I think I was earning something like 45 or 50 cents an hour.
Oh my gosh.
Of course, we're talking in the very early 50s.
Yeah, but still, how did you survive?
In high school, and which was Hollywood High was right around the corner. And by the way, when I got my star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Joe, the Hollywood High School band and drill team did the march in front of my beautiful 39 Cadillac that I was driven in by William Amundsen and his son. The Amundsen of the Amundsen theaters and everything in Los Angeles was my chauffeur. I mean, is that piss elegant or what?
Wow, what a treat that is.
Oh, yeah.
And so what does it mean when you look back at your career, and it's not over by any stretch, but what do you look back and think, boy, that was wonderful. This part, not so much. What are some of your favorites? What are some of your not so favorite times?
Well, I presume that my not so favorite times are the usual human problems that everybody has, and that is either facing illness with a loved one or death. And we all experience those, and hopefully they're people that are older than we are. There aren't too many people older than I am now. Hell, I'm older than dirt. But
you are not.
Most of my life, I have to say, in looking back, has been pretty wonderful. And there have always been lovely people that brought humor along the way. And that's the one really fabulous thing I think about being in show business, Joe, is that I don't think people in selling insurance or shoes or real estate have the laughs, the honest to God laughs that we do in show business. First of all, we all get tuned in to kind of humor, and we know where the joke is going, and you know, we appreciate laughter and the wonderful stories that are collected by show people. So my life has been good, and I have been truly blessed, and therefore either God tapped me on the shoulder or I took it on myself. But I feel that all of us, certainly I am the prime example, but all of us need to either pay back or pay forward blessings that come our way. Just being an American to me is a blessing. Just having a beautiful place in the Coachella Valley in Palm Springs to me is how much more of a blessing can you ask for? I have lived well. I've never been hungry. I've been able to reach out and use whatever celebrity I had to good advantage. I used it not just for myself, but to raise funds to help those people in this world who can't do it for themselves. And my best buddy in the world is Debbie Reynolds, and I miss her terribly. She was my adopted sister, my chosen sister. And she was the one that originally said to me, Ruta, you can ask anybody in this world for anything as long as it isn't for yourself. If you're doing it for somebody else,
Right.
people will not say no to you. And that's a lesson that I want to pass on to all of the young people of today's age, of today's genre. They're not as generous as those of us who grew up appreciating show business from vaudeville on.
Well, is part of it because you grew up with not as much and you know the value of giving back?
Maybe so. Maybe so. I mean, my mother and father were the greenhorns that came over from Lithuania and couldn't get into the United States because the quotas were closed. And so my father got a job in the wheat fields of Canada in Saskatchewan for a year, and then brought my mother over, and they settled in Montreal, Canada, where I was born. And I'm an adopted daughter of these blessed United States. And but they were poor. They didn't have a pot to pee in. I mean, they really had to scrimp and save. And they taught me a tremendous, and they gave me a great gift, which is a work ethic. I am a real believer in strong work, and saving will see anybody through anything. I don't want to hear long, sad sob stories. If you're willing to work and get your ass in gear and get out there, I don't care if it's with a pick and a shovel, or whether it's waiting tables or washing dishes or washing cars or dog walking, whatever, you can save your money so that you can buy something and not necessarily pay rent. It can be done. The United States were proverbially the place where the streets were paved with gold. And if you aren't afraid to work, they are paved with gold.
What do you think your parents would think if they were, and probably are, up in heaven reading your book? What do you think they would think about it?
I think they'd be very proud. My father, of course, would never, ever say anything about you look pretty, or you did well, or that was nice. I could always be better as far as my father was concerned. My mother, to whom I basically owe anything that I have accomplished in life, because she gave me the lessons when my kindergarten teacher said to her, Mary, your daughter is a little different from all of the other children I have in my kindergarten classes. Give her some lessons. Let her get some music, let her get some dance, let her get something going. And my mom, who worked very hard, scrimped and saved and put together those pennies and dollars to give me lessons. And she's the one that got us to California too, when it wasn't easy after World War II to get a visa to leave Canada to come to the United States. The Lithuanian quotas that my mother and father were on were taken, and she's the one that did it. And wow, she took great pride in the fact that I did reach some modicum of celebrity, and anything as far as the show business was concerned she was very happy with, because she was the one that let me do the little plays in the church hall, and sing in the choir for church and so on and so forth. And of course, I always say, I think I owe my first fabulous movie job, and to this day my favorite, which was Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, I owe it to the fact that I knew how to do a good Lithuanian polka, because when Michael Kidd, the choreographer, saw me do a little ballet in the audition and then a little jazz, in my cute little tights, and then he said, "Can you do something folksy?" And I let loose with a good Lithuanian polka. I swear that got me the job. I'm not sure, Joe, whether it was my polka or my mother on her knees across the street lighting candles in church, hoping I'd get the job. But I got it, and boy, what an auspicious beginning, to be in one of the films that wound up one of the favorite musicals ever made.
Your mom and dad would be so proud. But when you were growing up, was there anything that they talk to you about? Maybe if the show business thing doesn't work out, why don't you be a nurse, or why don't you be a secretary, or any of that?
Never, ever, ever did I hear that. In my own mind, when I was in high school, I sort of thought, what else could I do to earn a living? And this is what I kind of say to young people that whenever I'm asked about show business and how do you get in and what do you do, I say, get an education so that you can feed yourself doing whatever it is you do while you're reaching for the stars that are hard to reach in show business. But my folks never ever thought of me doing anything else, I think, because from the time I was 3 and 4 years old in kindergarten, I was already appearing in things, either amateur shows or school things or whatever. And then the Lithuanian community got to know about me, and I'd be invited to come to do something in Boston or in New York. And I mean, we're talking about a 6, 7, 8-year-old here, So there was really never anything else for me to do. But the fact that my mother, who was a little farm girl who literally carried her shoes to church every Sunday, didn't wear them across the fields and jumping across streams to get to church. Those shoes had to be passed down to the next daughter and the next daughter. And she had absolutely no knowledge of show business. But somehow her heart knew that she was doing the right thing. And she's the one that kind of maneuvered to get us to California. And somehow, without even speaking the language well, my mother had a very heavy accent that got heavier the older she got. And she managed to find people to kind of help. She just did everything, that she possibly could. So I owe her, and of course my dad, who supported what she was doing, because let's face it, it all took a little money, and I never had to worry about where my next meal was coming from. So I really admire the kids that do it all on their own and didn't have a great home in which to live and support yourself while you were trying to find work.
The book is called Consider Your Ass Kissed, and on February 11th, the Palm Springs Women's Press Club will be having their February luncheon, and Ruta Lee is the guest speaker. You will be there at 11:30 at the Springs Country Club in Rancho Mirage, and of course you'll have your book and you'll be signing.
Oh, yes. It's a great pleasure. We've got great people in our valley. I'm so proud to be even a part-time resident.
Well, it is always a pleasure to see you, to talk with you. You are such a bright light here, and it is always just a real pleasure for me. Thank you.
Joe, I thank you for your friendship. We've been buddies for a lot of years, and I'm very grateful to the Almighty for putting you in my life, and I will see you soon. And once again, everybody, may God keep smiling on all of us, and above all, dear God, please keep smiling on America. Sometimes we don't deserve it, but keep smiling.